All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. For those of you that are online, we appreciate your time as well. And hope the voice is coming clear. And if not, please let us know. Any questions that do come up, we will be monitoring those. And just give me time, and the question will come up, and I'll try to answer it for you as well as possible. So that said, we're going to move forward. And this presentation is brought to you by the Community Development Department for the City of Greenfield. And it has to do with one of the main questions that we always get all the time. And it's just not Greenfield per se, but other jurisdictions as well. And that is, why do I need a permit? When do I need a permit? I didn't know that I had to get a permit and things of the sort. So, well, this is just so that we can clarify to you and bring to you the reasons why and what are permits, what type of permits, and when are you required to get one. So that said, move to the next slide. Sorry for the inconvenience. So again, why do we need a permit? Well, mostly it's because of everybody's safety, ours, yours, and those around you as well. So you want to be able to have an environment that is safe for all those around you. Next thing is code compliance. Of course, anytime you do something, anytime you want to build something, anytime you want to change anything, you want to make sure that it is compliant with the code. And then you can say, well, what codes? Well, there are very many different types of codes. It's not just one or two. There's a whole bunch of codes that come into the play. So just want to make sure that you are code compliant. So the next thing is material acceptance. There are many things that people want to do and they just want to build. And you'll see in the course of the production a couple of slides that I came up with, and that has construction that, of course, it wouldn't be permissible here in the States. No matter where I've been here, it's never like that. But nevertheless, things do happen other places in the world that, again, shouldn't be, but they don't have probably the same compliance levels that we do here in the States. So that said, we move forward to the next slide. For instance, talk about safety. This particular slide here is at the top of a museum in an Asian country that I visited a little while ago. And the little yellow line right there is in Portuguese, and it's telling you that do not go beyond that line. And the reason why is because on the other side of that, which is the next picture on the right, it's about 100-foot drop. So there's nothing to prevent anybody from tripping over that little ledge and actually falling over on the other side. So the other thing is, it says yellow. What if you're colorblind and you can't see? You don't know what yellow is because if you're colorblind, you don't know that. So of course you say that do not go beyond this line, but it says yellow. So in any event, those things are the ones that, at least here, we try to make sure that people are protected, no matter where you are, no matter what environment you are in the building environment, that is. So, next slide, please. And again, we mentioned code compliance. And as I was saying, this particular slide here has a bamboo type of construction for scaffold, which again, never seen it before until I went there. And I was kind of like, whoa, wait a minute, I got to take a picture of that. Because it's just one of those things that will not happen, at least not that I'm aware of, unless, of course, there's testing and procedures, and finally somebody says, no, this is a material that has been tested, complies with the requirements, there is criteria that we provided, and so on and so forth. And yes, it may be that a material like this can be used, but I don't think it's going to be used for scaffolding. maybe something else. But nevertheless, we may see that in the future. Next slide, please. Again, material acceptance. Something like this, we have all kinds of electrical wiring. It's touching the guardrail there. The guardrail, it's metal, it's all exposed. Well, a lot of those wires may not be necessarily approved for exterior use. What happens with that is over time, the sheathing starts to deteriorate and then the wiring becomes bare wire. Even though you don't see it, perhaps at night, you will see a little sparking, and that is because it's lost its protection. So things like this, we try, and the code has provisions so that that wiring gets protected one way or another. And if it's wiring that is going to be exposed to the weather, then it's a special type of wiring, and it has had that approval so that it can be used for that specific application. So we move now to who and when. The who is who needs to get a permit or who will get the permit. Well, there are different people, different persons that can obtain the permit. And that would be the homeowner. The homeowner is ultimately always responsible for the permit, whether he or she obtained it or not. But if things happen to get out of hand and you happen to end up in court because something went wrong and you got sued, and all of a sudden you say, well, I didn't know. Well, the court's going to say you're responsible to know because you own the property. And ultimately, that is what happens. So it comes down to the owner of the property. But the owner can also say, well, I was doing it myself and I want to do the permit myself. And that's what we term in the industry as being a owner builder, which is that. And that's fine too. Ultimately, you're the owner, you're the person that's doing the work, and so you are responsible for it. And the next one would be the contractor. And we all have heard contractors, right? Come in and say, oh yeah, I'll get a permit. Well, as an owner, make sure that this contractor actually does show you proof that he or she has a permit. Because I have seen people come in and tell me stories that, well, I thought I had a contract. Yeah, but all of a sudden there was no permit and he was responsible for getting the permit. Well, always get that permit in hand. Make sure that you look at it and that it says permit, that it says approved, that it's all of those things need to be in line so that later on questions come up. You can pull your little piece of paper and say, here, I have it, I did it, and that's that. Also, the owner may not be a person that lives in town. Maybe it's a person that lives way out of town, maybe in a different country, or something to that effect. Well, there are conditions where an authorized agent can come into the jurisdiction and actually apply for your permit on your behalf. And that's fine. There's a special form, of course, that needs to be filled out so that later on we can always show that, yes, the owner's representative was here to put the permit, and here's the documentation for it. So now know the who, the when. Well, when do you want to get a permit? When should you get a permit? When is a permit required? Different permits are required at different times, but always, let's make sure that it's before you start to work. Reasons why is because you want to know what's coming your way when you're applying for your permit. What things are there that may be a big hiccup along the way? What things are there that you need to know that you will have to do, which maybe you were not aware that you have to do those things, which maybe you said, I wasn't budgeting for that because I didn't think it was going to be part of it. Well, guess what? Then you will find out if you do it beforehand, if you do your process, your due diligence before that time. So now we know the who, the why, the when, the compliances, and all of those things. So let's move on to what happens with the actual codes. So, like I said before, there are very many different codes. And this is pretty much talking about the building side of the codes. So most codes assume that you will need a permit for everything, because that's the basis of it, is you need to be covered for everything. But then they say, well, you know what? There are certain things that you may not need a permit for because they're simple in nature, because the occupancy and or the use of these particular structures is not that significant, and the risk is low compared to other uses in other occupancies. So the code, the building code, has itemized for you certain items that are not required to provide a permit. I'm not going to read all of them, but I just want to mention a few of them. Like, for instance, fences are not. This is, again, I want to reiterate that this is related to the building permit requirements. Like I said before, there are other permits in the industry, and those are not what I'm going to cover in this particular lecture or seminar today, if you want. But I'll just touch on a couple of them. For instance, if you need to get conditional use permit, that is a permit that comes from a different division. And it would come from the planning division department in the jurisdictions that you're applying for. Yes, it is a permit, but it's not a building permit. But yet you still need to get that permit before you can move forward. You want to put another driveway in your own personal house. You just say, well, you know, I want to put a driveway. Well, you have to get a permit. And even though it's not a building permit, it's a different type of a permit. And it's an encroachment permit, which it will be required before you can do that. So again, the building code has said for certain things you don't need a permit, and they're listing it for you specifically so that you know ahead of time which are those things that you are exempted from having to apply for a building permit. For instance, a fence, like I said before, it's not, as long as a fence has a criteria that is not more than a certain height, that is not in a location where it's required to have a different type of a permit from planning, in different types of materials. Now, the code says that you can build just about anything, provided that the materials that you're using are those that are covered in the code. And the code tells you what are those materials. I'm not going to go into that, but it is one of those things that's why the code is there, because those materials have already been accepted, which goes back to the material acceptance in the criteria of the code. So another one is prefabricated swimming pools. Like if you want to put a little swimming pool in your house and back, yeah, it says, well, if it's prefab, it's not a certain size, it's not a certain, then yes, you don't require to have that permit. But let's say that you say, well, you know, I also want to have hot water going into this little pool because the kids are going to be using. Well, yeah, guess what? Yeah, the hot water issue could be the one that you need a permit for, because that is not what the swimming pool permit is exempt. Because now you're having to bring piping, now you have to do all fittings. So that may be something that, if you wanted to do that, you need to be considered, and or just leave it there, fill it with water, let kids enjoy it, and they're fine. One of the other ones is painting and finish work. Yeah, those are not restricted by the building code. Although, if you have a homeowners association, or if you have a place where the community has a planned community, then you may need to check with them to see if you need to get something from them, because the color may be not the one that they like, and maybe the trim is different. So again, it's not a building permit requirement. It could be something required by some other agency, such as the homeowners association. Along with that, walkways, driveways. Again, driveways are not regulated in the code because it's just what they call flat work on the ground, depending if it's not what we term in the industry, a structural slab on grade. If it's not, you don't require a permit. If it's a driveway, you don't require a permit. But there are certain requirements that have to do with the coverage of the front yard of your property. That may be a certain percentage. Different jurisdictions have different percentages for different zoning districts within that jurisdiction. Here in San Gabriel, for a single family home term RL in the zoning, yes, you do have a requirement, and that requirement is 40%. So you need to find out where your 40% is so that you don't have to come back later because you got a citation saying that you're more than 40%. So those things you need to watch out for. Another one that's retaining walls. I get a lot of questions, and I've gotten questions retaining walls. The code said, the building code says you're not required to have a building permit for a retaining wall, as long as your retaining wall is not over 4 feet. But there is a criteria that says that 4 feet is measured from the bottom of the footing, not the top of the footing, and it's from the bottom of the footing to the very top of the wall. It's 4 feet is not that tall. That's the reason why the code says, you know what, it's only 4 feet. By the time you get the footing, you're only looking at maybe 3 feet. What's going to happen? Hardly anything. And if it does start to tip over, then you know that you have a problem with another one, take that one out. Again, those are not required to provide a permit. So habitable, anything that's habitable uses, you're going to put it outside, but you're going to have a habitable use to it. By that, we mean you're going to go out there, put chairs, sit down and enjoy. Those are required to have a permit. Your patios, detached patios, and things like that, covered pergolas, those will need a permit. Again, the reason why is because you have people that are there. And now you added that extra risk to that structure in order to be able to be safe for what it's proposed to be. Retrofit windows. I had a lot of questions of those. And yes, you do need a permit for the retrofitting of the windows. And that is because now we need to find out if the window that you are replacing or you're retrofitting is required to provide an egress for that room. So it's important that if you didn't have that egress, that now you provide that egress. Because you never know when somebody in your house, may not be necessarily you, could be somebody that's visiting you, could be, yes.
What's retrofit and what is egress?
Okay, retrofitting means that you have a window that it's existing and you are putting another window in its place. And you want to be able to say, I don't want to move the whole thing. I just want to put a new sash with a little bit of a frame in it. You're not taking out the whole window and the whole window frame and putting all that. So that's a retrofit. A new window, it's a new window. And a new window will require a permit no matter what. Okay. But a retrofit is different. It's just that you're taking that out, you're leaving the frame, and they make those so that it's easier to be able to retrofit the windows without going through a huge expense of putting a whole new, which they are expensive. So back to the egress. The egress is something that the code requires for habitable rooms, such as a bedroom. You want to be able, in the event of an emergency, whether it be fire, earthquake, or somebody's fainted in your room and you need to have access to that person. Well, first responders usually don't like to go into the house if they have access from the outside because it's easier to go around and pull that person from the house. So that's the reason why that egress window is a requirement. Of course, if you have a door that leads to the outside from that room, then you're exempted from the window requirement because you have a door. So you do have met the egress requirement. But if you don't, then the windows are required. And there are requirements for that window that's going to be an egress window for the width of the opening and for the height of the opening, so that somebody can come in and pull you out and you can come out from that window without much effort. Let's put it that way. There's also a requirement for the height of the window. I know a lot of the houses here in California, they used to be built in the 50s and in the 60s, and they have these long windows in the bedrooms, tall, really tall windows. And it's like, how do you get out of this room? You can't. Even a young person, it's very difficult to do that. And if you have a fire that's burning in a couple of other rooms, and now you have smoke coming into your room, you're trapped. You're basically trapped because that window is not going to afford you or first responders to come out and get you. So that's the reason why the code now says, yes, if you are doing that type of work, you will be required to have a permit. On the other hand, if you have an older house, double-sized door, windows that went up and down, wooden windows and things like that. Somebody throws a stone at you, at the window, and he breaks it. Okay, that's the glass of the window that broke. That does not require a permit on those older homes. Okay, the newer ones, we'll talk about those later. But yes, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Any other questions so far? Okay. All right. So moving forward, again, like I said before, some will require a different type of a review or a different type of a permit. So it's important to always check with your jurisdiction and find out what do you need in order to get your result of what you want, whether it's this or whatever it is that you're planning. The intent is you are planning to do something, find out so that there's no surprises along the way. And those may sometimes get to be very expensive. So moving forward, slide please. Just like the building code, we also have an electrical code. And the electrical code, again, assumes that it's more, actually, I should say that beforehand. The electrical code assumes that everything and anything, it doesn't matter what you do, you are required to help. Why? It's electrical. It's something that a lot of things happen because electricity is flowing through. So they want to make sure that they have covered all their bases and that people know that doing a permit for that. If you notice in the building code, prior slides, there were about maybe 10 or 11 bullet points. Well, this code only has probably 6, and that's the reason why. It's just telling you these are the minor things that the code will exempt you from having a permit. And as you can see, pretty much is everything that's done by somebody that's authorized and licensed to do the work, which is not a house. So I should have mentioned this before that, but again, this is mostly dealing with single-family dwellings and duplexes. So, and the reason why we have the building code, the mechanical code, the electrical code, are because once we adopted the codes in California, we went to the residential code. And California said, no, we are not going to adopt the entire residential code. We're just going to adopt the basic portions of the building side of the residential code. The other stuff, which is covered in the International Residential Code, is a complete document. It's building, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, everything is in that document. But California said no. So California said no, we are going to do the mechanical, the plumbing, and the electrical based on the mechanical, electrical, plumbing code in California. So back to this now. If you are going to do electrical work, you come out of the residential code, then you have to go to the electrical code. And the electrical code says, okay, these are the few things that, and if you read it, everything requires it when it comes down to electrical, bottom line. So again, moving forward to the next slide, you'll see that as we move on, the plumbing code is one of those that also restricts everything. And it says, well, we got water flowing here, just like the electrical system. Oh, we got now water and electrical flowing. Ooh, that's not a good thing. So they said, well, we're going to restrict what you can do when you're doing plumbing work. Part of the reason why is because if you do not do the plumbing work correctly, guess what's going to happen? Right, you're going to have leaks all over the place. And before you know it, perhaps you didn't know it, but there's a leak coming through. And that may affect your electrical work. And before you know it, you got problems in your house that you didn't even think you were going to have. Because what? You thought that whoever did the work did it correctly. But unfortunately, a lot of the work that does not get permitted, yes, that is correct, does not get inspected. And that's the problem. It's that it's uninspected work and we don't know what happened, what materials were installed. And so later on, you'll find that benefits are having a permit so that these problems don't occur. And if they occur, it's for other reasons. And of course, nothing is guaranteed that it's going to be 100% of the time correct all of the time, because we are humans, so we make mistakes. So again, these are just saying, hey, if you got stoppages, if you got repairs that need to be done right away, yes, you're exempted from getting the permit now, but you have to get it later. And so again, it's just the practice that they want to protect the occupants in that particular house, in that particular duplex, from having issues that later will be a little bit more costly. And we don't want that, or at least the codes don't want that to happen. Also, the mechanical code, same thing. It assumes that, hey, you're going to be installing equipment. And equipment, some of the equipment has different attachments to it. Most equipment runs on electricity. So they said, you know what, piece of equipment, it's got electricity to it, it's going to be attached to it. We need to have a permit on that. Because now I know that the electrical is correct, because we got a permit for that, and we also got a permit for the electrical, so we're covered. It may have so the equipment that HVAC has refrigeration to it. Well, now the energy kicks in, because the energy says, no, you cannot have that particular refrigerant, that particular type of HVAC equipment. So all kinds of things happen. Yes, you might find somebody out there stuff, but I'll do the HVAC for you for a certain amount of money, right? Well, how do you know that it's going to be done, right? How do you know that that piece of equipment, number one, is it approved for, I should say, California? California is very restrictive as far as what it's approved and what is not, especially when it comes down to equipment, especially when it comes down to HVAC. And so the energy code is very restrictive, and it only allows certain types of equipment to be installed. They're listed. They have to be listed for use in California. I've heard stories, people going out of state, getting the equipment there, bringing it back and installing it. Yeah, it happens. But again, if you did not get a permit, it will happen. If you did get a permit, guess what? The inspector goes out and says, ooh, you know that tag of that equipment? It's not in California. So it's like, ouch, right? So you are protected by virtue of having gotten your permit and having gotten your inspection. So one of the things that in California, sorry. It's this. That equipment is installed totally incorrectly, unsafe. And so, again, we just want to make sure that safety is always there, and that whatever equipment is there, it's approved, that it's installed correctly, that it's not going to fall on your head or somebody else's head and hurt somebody. And that can be a big problem. So we're always trying to protect you and have a safe environment in your house, in your duplex. All right. So we're at the bottom of the presentation here, and I know there are some burning questions out there. So any questions?
Do I need a permit to replace my water heater that is not working properly?
Okay. The question is, and we do get a lot of those, my water heater is out. Do I need a permit to replace the water heater? Yes, you do. Part of the reason why is because, it's just a water heater, just a tank that has water, right? It's basic. Yeah, but then it has an attachment to it that it's gas. And then that comes with the thing that, okay, it's got the gas, it's got the water. And then we're saying, okay, now I'm going to put it a little bit high because I want it. Now you have a tank that's full of water, 80 gallons, and that thing is going to want to move. In the event of a seismic, it wants to move because it's normal. Anything that's heavy and it's up, it's going to want to move. So we want to be able to say, make sure that it's restricted, that it's not going to fall on you, that it's not going to fall on your brand new Mercedes-Benz in your garage, right? And that thing just flops down and it ruins your car or whatever the car they have in there. Or somebody might be there. You never know. You don't know when an earthquake is going to hit and where you're going to be. You could be the person that was just in the garage cleaning. It hit and you don't want that. So that's why the code says, yes, you do need to have a permit because we need to verify that the gas connection to the heater is done properly, that the valve that it's in that heater, it works properly, that the heater is somehow attached to the building and it's restrained from movement. And the other thing is, there's been a lot of incidents and accidents happening with water heaters exploding. Well, that's the reason why. It's because a lot of the times, whoever installed it chose not to put the valve that allows the water pressure in that system to open up when that pressure reaches a certain pressure. And so if there is no valve, it has nowhere to go. And that heater is going to explode, basically. But there's that also requirement. You have that valve so that that valve carries out the water to a location where you can see it. Hey, where's the water coming from? Oh, it's from the heater. Oh, that tells me that something is wrong with the heater. It's kind of like a check engine light for the water heater. So yes, again, a permit is required for a change out of your hot water heater. Any other questions? Yes.
So I just want to clarify, if I want to build like a small shed, like only 120 square feet, I don't need a permit. But what about if I want to have electricity? Does that change anything?
Yes. It's not because of the size of the particular storage space. It's because now you're attaching electricity to it. And so that is the aspect of it that the code says we want to have protection for you. So when you're out there and you flip the switch, things work. Or when you plug into something, you're not going to get electrocuted. Or your children may be out there. Whoever is out there, kids do a lot of things sometimes. And so that's the protection that the code is looking as far as the occupant. That it's not an occupiable space, but virtue of providing the electricity component to it, now you made a risk attachment to it of a human being there and getting hurt and getting electrocuted. And that's the reason why the permit is being required. Sure. Anything else? Any other questions?
Just to kind of piggyback off on the permit.
Sure.
What's the difference between me getting permit for 120 square foot shed and our permit to go to 150 or 160 square feet? Why do those additional square feet make a difference? And how is it going to be
Right. The question is, where do we draw the line? And who drew the line of the 120? Well, that's particular aspect goes back, if I remember correctly, 35, 40 years. It was in the building code way back then. And the thinking was that it's not such a big structure. It's to the point that 120 square feet is not going to move that much. It's not going to deflect that much. And it's not an occupiable space again. It's not. If it was an occupiable space, you would need a permit. So this is just, again, just a little storage space out there, something that you want to do. So people that make the code and provide these regulations, they have committees, and this committee decided that, you know what, we're going to cap it at 120 square feet. It's a nice size room, so it's good. The bigger you get, now you're looking at stresses of members, longer members, and now the code says, well, no, because the residential code and the building code, even though structurally are about the same, there are very certain differences as to when you build a house or a duplex under the California residential code than when you build it under the California building code. The rate of the spans of the members you're using is more restrictive in the residential code than it is in the building code. And that's why when you build a structure similar to that, it's the residential code that you're living in. And so it restricts all of those as well. And that is the reason mainly why the 120 versus the 130, the 140.
So if I do a shed that has 420, can I just put it anywhere or does it
Question is, can I put my shed, my she shed or he shed or whatever shed, anywhere I want it? Again, the building code does not require location. It doesn't get into that. But the jurisdiction that you're in this case, in Greenfield, there is a municipal code and there's a planning aspect to that that says, if you want to have this, these are the locations where you can have it, and you must abide by these locations and provide certain yard requirements so that you don't want to have a shed up in the front yard that everybody looks at the corner, drive by, and it's like mainly the reason why is aesthetics. And also, you don't want to have a shed next to the other shed of your neighbor next door, and it causes a fire, and then that shed gets on fire. Then before you know it, it's a huge fire because the one shed was so close to the other one that it allowed that to happen. So yes, the planning part of it does have requirements as to location of. So yes, it's important. You want to do a shed, come to the city, find out where you can have it, and then later you don't have to move it or be cited for it because it's in the wrong location, it's the wrong size. So those things try to avoid. Question? Yes.
I want to replace my fence. My wood fence is the same height, but I would like to replace it for concrete.
The fences, again, depending on the height of the fence, the building code has regulations just like we saw before. And it says if you have a fence that is not higher than a certain height, yes, you can build it without the benefit of a permit. Residential code says 6 feet. So as long as your fence is not more than 6 feet, you're required not to have a permit. Can you build it out of concrete? Yes, you can. Can you build it out of CMU? Yes, you can. Can you build it out of any of the materials that are permitted in the code to build a fence? Yes, you can. Problem is, there may be certain requirements again from the jurisdiction as far as their municipal code in the planning side of it that says, if you build it with this, then you need to do this. So even though a building permit, like I said before, it's not required, you may need to have a different type of an administrative permit just to document it. That yes, you came in, this is the fence, here it is, and everybody's happy, and we're good to go. Yes.
For fences that are not wood, we do the city that requires it.
I'm sorry.
When the fence is not wood.
Okay.
we require-
Right. I was just told that in the city of Greenfield, if your fence is not wood, you do require a permit. Again, like I said before, in the building code, in the residential code, it does not talk about that. And that's why it's important. If you want to build a fence, come to the jurisdiction, come to the city, find out what you need to do in order to make it happen and not have issues later. Any other questions?
If I need to replace my toilet, do I need a permit?
Okay. Question is, I have a bad toilet. It's leaking and I need to replace it. Believe it or not, in the plumbing code, it says that a permit is required for the change out of the toilet. Because they want to make sure that the new toilet complies with the energy, not the energy, but the water consumption requirements in California. So it's simple as that. And you say, well, why do I have? That's the reason why. California is probably the most restricted state in the states as far as regulations when it comes down to energy, especially in water consumption and other requirements. We are the most restricted ones. And those, the code says, well, you gotta get that. So if you are replacing it, but if you just fixing the one that you have there, and you fix the leak, and you fix the, change out the inside and put whatever you need. That was not required. But the question was, if I am replacing it, then yes, you do about it. There are new requirements for toilets as far as the number of gallons per flush that you need to maintain every time you flush. And that's what we're looking for when that happens. Questions?
Where's the one that another?
Installing a new outlet or replacing the equipment?
Replacing it.
Yes, as I pointed out before in the electrical code, anything that is attached to electrical, other than if I want to bring my cell phone and plug it, that is what is defined in the code as a plug and play thing. That is not, it does not require, it's not regulated. If I want to put a window air conditioner in my house, that is not regulated by the code. Why? Because the cord is a certain distance, and if you have a chance to measure one day, that cord is not only 6 feet. And that's part of the reason why it's electrical and mechanical got together. So, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. Mind you, if you put it in the bedroom window, that it's going to be the egress window, that could be a problem. But not because of the installation of the actual unit, but because you're violating the requirement of the egress window. But I'm sure there's another window that you can put it in that. So again, the electrical code says anytime you do with electrical, we want to look at it. We want to make sure that it's done correct. So if I am going to change the outlet from this location to this location, definitely you need to get a permit. New wiring, new system, and for that portion of it, yes. If I'm going to have a faulty outlet and I know that it's faulty and I want to replace the outlet, do I get a permit? Yes. That outlet, it's what the code defines as electrical equipment, and it's attached to electrical. We want to make sure that that connection is done properly so that when next time you plug it in, you're not going to have spark. We don't see the spark because it's covered. So if it's not done correctly, it's going to be sparking, and then it's going to trip your meter outside. And it's always going to be that because it wasn't done correctly. And who knows, maybe eventually it's going to create more problems. So yeah, it's better to come in and get a permit. And I am sure that jurisdictions have a very minimal cost to that type of a permit, but your protection is huge when it comes down to that. So always try to do the best. Yes, sir.
You talked about a whole range of different projects that residents undertake. So the question is, what if we did a project, but we did not get a permit, and it all seems fine, but we really would like to have legal? What should we do as a project?
All right. And that happens more often than we like it to happen. I go ahead and say, you know what, I know what I'm doing. I've done this before. I'll go ahead and do it. I'll do this, and everything gets done. Like the gentleman said, come in and said, okay, yeah, everything is done, and now we can occupy this place, right? And then it was like, oh, you know what, maybe not. And that is what people have deemed in the past. There are two terms. There is what is called permitted non-conforming situations. The first thing is permitted. So it was permitted at one time. In this particular instance, we would define that as a non-permitted, probably most likely non-conforming situation. And yes, the jurisdiction, once it is aware that this is happening, you need to take action because that may create a lot of issues. You have all kinds of systems there that may, most likely will not be in compliance. And that's part of the reason why this got done the way it got done. because they don't want to comply. A lot of people say, no, we just put this, we'll just put that, we'll use this and we'll use that. Some things, a lot of things have changed in the code. What used to be a typical enclosure for a wall 20 years ago, it's not the same as it is now. Will it serve the same purpose? Yes, it does. But the materials and the requirements are different. The nailing schedule is different. The thickness is different. The tape that you use, it's different. So there are subtle differences that even though 20 years ago you used to do that, now it will not comply with the code. And so, yes, back to your question, we do need to take action or something like that to make sure that it is foremost, first slide, safe for the occupants to be in there. You don't want to go into a place that it's not safe. How do you know that? Well, as an occupant to a place, you do know that because you have a certificate of occupancy that says this place is safe to occupy. And here's a signature of the person that signed it, and you're good to go. If there is no occupancy certificate, I would say, no, show me the certificate of occupancy, right? I've been doing plan reviews for most of my life. And when my daughter was younger, every time we went into, especially a place that's a lot of people, restaurants and things like that, I would get in and then I would start looking, right? And then she'd say, Dad, what are you looking for? And I said, well, first off, I want to know that you and I can get out of this place if something happens. So I want to make sure that where my exits are. I said, but you know, he says, yeah, you're right. It's here. The problem is I did not check this building. So I have no clue if it was done correctly, if there are flaws here and there. So I want to protect most of you because, you know, I want to protect you and then make sure that we can get out of this thing. So it's important that everywhere you go, if you have an opportunity, look and see that. You have the signs that you have your occupant load posted for your occupancies for restaurants, bars, and things like that, so that you feel that extra safety when you are in a place like that. Did that answer your question, sir? Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. Yes.
Are pre-manufactured homes or mobile homes allowed? Can I put one in the backyard of the public?
Are pre-manufactured homes or
Mobile.
motorhomes? Okay. Motorhomes are not in the building code. They're in a different title in California. So the building requirements do not apply, just like boats. They don't apply to that either. So a motorhome will probably not be allowed to be installed in the rear yard of your home if you are going to use it for living purposes. If you are going to store your motorhome there because you're prepping it so that you can take your family on a road trip over to Arizona, New Mexico, and all that, yes, that's fine. You can have your motorhome there as long as you don't use it for living. But we've all seen them, parked trailers, and first thing you know, you see this cord, electrical cord attached to it, and then on the other side, you see this water hose attached to it. Well, guess what? Somebody's living there. And that's the problem, is that they are not permitted for that use. And you would say, well, what's the difference? I'm living in here and I'm living it in the park where I work. Well, yeah, that's the difference. Your home is your home, requirements apply. When you put it there for 3 days or 4 days at the RV park, they have requirements for the connections, for the water, for all those which you don't have. So you don't have that protection, right? You septic. Well, where are you going to put your septic? At home. That's the reason why. So there you go. Motorhomes. So pre-manufactured homes, they are permitted in the code, but you do have to get a permit, and you have to also make sure that the location where you're going to put it, it's allowed in the city that you are going to. In this case, in Greenfield, you have to come in and check with the building department And then they will tell you exactly where you can put your house. You may have to go through different reviews here and there, but at least you will know that, yes, you can do it, or you know what, no, you can't do it. Because there's lot coverage requirements and other requirements that may come into the picture that you didn't know about. So before you purchase it or before you go forward, check with the jurisdiction. Right? Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you again very much for your attendance, those that are here, and thanks those that are online watching us as well. And I think the message that I want to bring home to all of you is that we are here to help you, but you need to let us help. Otherwise, we can't help you if you don't let us help. We're here to protect the citizens and everybody in it. So as well, come in, ask questions. We're here. The easiest thing is just come and see us. We're available in the mornings, in the afternoons. There's always somebody here. Call us, send us an email. And that way, we'll be able to serve you better. If any other questions do come up that were not covered, by all means, send us an email and we will pursue them and send you an email back with a question. Thanks again. Appreciate it.